Hello, and welcome to today's Power of Knowing webinar, The Role of Faith in End-of-Life Decisions. Understanding comes from knowing, and faith is a part of life for many. When end-of-life decision-making is being discussed, faith can provide formal and informal support and resources. This webinar will focus on how faith can be part of planning for end of life, providing comfort and ensuring wishes are known and followed. This free webinar series is called The Power of Knowing and was created by AuthoriCare Collective, which empowers people to be active participants in their care journey, enabling them to live on their own terms through personalized support for mind, body, and spirit. To get us started, please welcome our moderator, Risa Hanau. Risa serves as clinical and community educator at AuthoriCare Collective and is also a member of the Cone Health Ethics Committee. She is a licensed clinical social worker. Risa, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Paul. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce our panelists for today. First, Gail LeBauer. Gail is a retired psychiatric nurse and currently serves on the Board of Trustees of the AuthoriCare Foundation. She has had a passion since her childhood to take care of other people and to help them on their path. That's what led her to become a psychiatric nurse, and she has always been committed to a spiritual awareness of how we are all created in the same way, and while acknowledging that we are the same underneath, our traditions, beliefs, and skin may be different. Gail is very grateful for the path that she has been on and remains committed to helping others while trying to be the best person that she can be in any given moment. Welcome, Gail. The Reverend Holly Luck Sullivan. Holly is a board-certified chaplain with 10 years of experience in hospice care, where she works alongside patients and families to support them as they face end of life. Holly holds certifications in spiritual direction and integrative chaplaincy, and she serves on the education committee of the North Carolina Chaplains Association. Holly is ordained and fellowshipped in the Unitarian Universalist Church as a minister. And the Reverend Ray Watlington. Ray is an ordained Baptist pastor of more than 40 years. He is a humanitarian, educator, author, board-certified chaplain, and a skilled preacher. Ray is a man of great conviction, lover of God, family, and ministry. Since 2012, he has been employed as a staff chaplain at Cone Health on the Moses Cone campus and was the first to be appointed as the emergency department and trauma chaplain specialist. Thank you, and welcome to all of our panelists. And welcome to you, our participants for today. It's always wonderful when we get to know a little bit about you, our participants, and the best way we can do that is by making use of two polling questions. So you will see them on your screen. They are anonymous. So the first question, please select all that apply to you. We know that we can be a patient and a caregiver and a healthcare professional all at the same time. So choose all that apply to you. And then the second question, particular to our topic, we are interested to know whether faith, religion, however you define it, is a part of your daily life. So please take a moment and answer those two, and then we will look at the results. And it's always a nice way to have a sense of who is. So if we look at who is joining us, we have a good distribution of patients, many caregivers, many advocates, many healthcare professionals and human service professionals and also spiritual guides, really a balanced distribution. And over 90% of those on the call joining us have said that faith and religion is a part of your daily life. So it seems like a good place for us to begin our conversation. I do want to remind everyone that you have a Q&A box on your Zoom screen, so you can enter a question at any time, and we will try to answer those as we go through our webinar today. So, Gail, to get us started, we know that particularly it is Healthcare Decisions Day, and we want to be thinking about our lives, what gives our life meaning at all times. So can you tell us about the benefits of thinking about what gives our life meaning at any time, and the ways that we can share it with our loved ones rather than waiting until there's an actual crisis?
I think that we go through self-analyses and a desire to articulate to those that we love what we are like, but we put it aside. We say, okay, well, I'll get to that one day. It's okay, and they'll know me anyway. But the truth is, if we want them to know us, first of all, we have to know ourselves a bit. And then I think that one of the practices that I have been exposed to over and over again and have received some of are what's called ethical wills, or the wills of what do I want to tell those to come, not about my things, not about worried about my estates and my monies, but what am I really? Who did I come from? If I know the ancestors, if I know the grandparents and great-grandparents and even back to great-great-grandparents, let me make an aggregate of that. Absolutely, that'll be my perception, but it also is my perception that allows me to be me. For example, having been taught always that you can be kicked out of any country, me as a Jewish person, you will leave, you've lived here for a long time. What you put between your ears is the only thing no one can take from you. That the most important thing you can do is to become educated. That by 3 years old, you start to write letters that are covered with honey, and you lick them to show you the sweetness of education. So that's part of it. And part of it is you must value one another. You must build bridges to other people, because I, as a Jewish person, will always be an extraordinarily small minority in the world. And yet I must play a role in what's we call tikkun olam, which is improving the world, making the world better. It is my obligation to reach out to others, which I do through this and through many other things, to try to make the world different, better, and make a difference that I've been here in some small way, not because I get my name on a board and not because I get a statue. No, it's what do I do that makes life different for somebody else that matters. So that's what I would say is one of the most important things we can do going forward, to leave an ethical will for our children, our grandchildren, and those to follow.
Thank you. And there are many guides out there on how to do that, or we can just sit and start writing. But Holly, we know, even if we have an ethical will, we also know that during a time of terminal illness, progressive illness, when we are moving closer to the end of life, we know that for many, not all, but many, faith, religion, spirituality, however we define it, becomes a part of our end of life decision making. And can you talk to us about where that fits into many people's lives, what that looks like, and how people can attach to that if that's something that they are yearning for and seeking?
Certainly. I think anytime someone is approaching the end of life, whether that is imminent or months down the road, those big questions of meaning making come up. And so for people of faith or people for whom spirituality is important, that is a natural turning toward those beliefs and feelings. And it can also lead to a lot of questioning of what one has been brought up with or what one has always believed that isn't necessarily serving them at this point in their life as they had hoped. So faith can be a tricky thing at this time because there are these kind of almost opposing forces that I see people struggle with, which are desire to maintain that belief they've held for so long and needing more. And so part of my job as when I am their chaplain is simply helping them explore what that more might be. To so often, no matter what tradition we come from, we can kind of put blinders on and become narrow in our thinking. And often when we are facing our own mortality, we need to open up a little bit more again and find in our faith something that we haven't needed to look for before. So it may have been there all along. We just haven't bothered looking for it or had any reason to know it was there. So I think facing our mortality really encourages us, challenges us, if we're willing and up to the task, to engage with our faith in different ways. For some people, it's always interesting to see, for some people, that means turning toward faith, turning toward their belief. And for others, depending on their beliefs, it can mean, oh, but I was good in all of these ways, so this shouldn't be happening to me. And it can lead to a turning away. And so faith shows up in myriad ways. And the hope is that we can support wherever that faith is and help people tap into what the meaning making is. That if this is a time when someone feels distant from their sacred, their divine, what might we be able to do to help empower them to deal with that distance, deal with that missing of what was once there? And it is a really beautiful thing that so often I find folks whose illness is, sapping their physical energy so much, what little energy they might have, they can and do give to thinking about these types of things. And so there's a lot going on up here for many folks, even if the body is too incapacitated to be doing much at a given time. It is a very natural turning toward our beliefs and working through whatever we might need to work through.
Thank you. And so Ray, I mentioned that you work in the space of the emergency department and trauma. So you are often seeing people that are faced with crisis and decisions that may need to be made very quickly and under difficult circumstances. And I wonder how you, in your role as a chaplain, help people bring faith, their religion, their spirituality into that moment, to be a guide, to be a support. Talk to us some about that work that you do with people that you are literally being with.
Well, especially in the emergency room, there comes a time where it's important to ensure that they maintain a sense of dignity and a sense of worth in the midst of all of that. And while they're experiencing what they're experiencing, also try to provide a sense of comfort for them and a sense of security, to ensure that whatever meaning is being made, they also can find a sense of bringing closure to it.
So I wonder about, and maybe Ray and then Holly, I think about ritual. And I think about what is possible, even in that moment of crisis and trauma. Is it often or an option for you to assist people with identifying ritual that is part of their faith tradition to help guide them through a particular moment in the emergency room, or provide prayer that is appropriate? How do you determine what is going to be helpful for someone?
For me, first, we try to meet the individuals where they are. We do not impose any religion or any doctrine. We speak with those individuals, find out what would be helpful to them and help bring meaning to them. Help them to obtain peace at the time that they're experiencing or getting close to.
And Holly, you often have the opportunity to work with people over a longer period of time, not always,
Right.
but sometimes. And I wonder how you develop that relationship with people, and some of the work and the experiences that you've had where faith and religion have come forward for people.
For me, I think Ray is absolutely right that we get to know folks as chaplains. Our work is to learn about the people we're serving and support their particular beliefs. And what that can mean is providing rituals that are familiar. So for instance, several years ago, I served a patient who hadn't been able to go to her church in a very long time, but she wanted to be baptized. So I got to do a literal kitchen sink baptism in her kitchen with the hose from the sink. And it was so meaningful for her because it helped her root herself again in her faith, the faith of her childhood and throughout her life. And so there are moments like that we can reinvigorate traditions that, like I said, are familiar. And there are many times that I help people discover a ritual that is unique to them and their situation. Often that can mean letting go, whether that is letting go of anger or fear. And we talk about what might help them feel that sense of release and relief. And thankfully, I've been in hospice for 10 years now and have lots of things in my toolkit to help people create little rituals that don't cost any money and are simple and really meaningful to, as Ray said, give people that sense of peace, that sense of calm, that sense of being grounded. And I think so often it is crucial to feel that sense of peace and groundedness, to know that we are part of this world and we will always be part of this world. When we no longer walk upon it, we will be within it. And there are many rituals that we can access to help us remember that feeling.
Which, Gail, makes me think about when we look at that concept of an ethical will, or putting forth what our hope for the future, or what we want others to know about us and what has been important and what we hope for them. I wonder how you help people identify those things and weave them into telling their story, which then can be helpful, I think, whether they have a terminal illness or they're in the emergency room, how we're able to know our loved ones so we know what's important to them, and maybe even define the ethical will a little bit more. What exactly does it look like, or what are some of the ways it looks?
One of my favorite lines is from Hamilton, which is, who will live and who will die and who will write your story? And his story, history, or her story, it's our story. So it really behooves us to be able to try to just put down, whether we're doing it for others or for ourselves, our journey, our trials, our tests, what we thought were failures that then perhaps were absolutely one of our greatest moments. I always say, we'll understand our lives just before the coffin lid comes down. As we look backwards, everything that made no sense whatsoever will all of a sudden evolve into making perfect sense, that if this hadn't happened, that wouldn't have occurred, and this couldn't have been, so then I wouldn't be at this moment in time. Not with anger, with love, with compassion, with the same energy that you hold a little loved one or a little puppy in your arms. You hold you in your arms and look at what an amazing journey you've had. That doesn't mean you're a saint. It doesn't mean you've done everything right, but it really develops that feeling of awe that I think we each should have, because we were all given characters in our birth. We were given factors, we were given intelligence, race, religion, language, etc. We were given circumstances. And what we want to do is to grow. And one of our rituals, mine is during Passover, is the freeing ourselves from our enslavement from Pharaoh. But the truth is, we will not be free until we have facilitated all men to be free. That includes ourselves. And oftentimes we are the ones who enchain ourselves by the stories or the angers or the pains of what those who came before or we have gone through. And to me, when I say write my ethical will, my story, it's for liberation. It's for caring. It's not to get back at anybody. It's not going to, I'm ratting on you. No, I want to grow. And I want to grow me so that when I take my last breath, it's a breath of freedom. It's a breath that I have acknowledged my ability to release myself. And whoever will read it will read it. And whoever will be impacted will be impacted. I would love to have had my great-great-grandparents' stories written down. I know some of them because we have good narratives about the journeys that they went on. But I'd love to know more about their own feelings and their struggles. And that, I can't do them, but I can do me. So that's what I want to give myself, the gift of knowing that when I take my last breath, when that coffin lid does come down, I will understand so much more than I can understand going through. And even in dying, even in suffering, even with illness, there is beauty, there is release. It's traumatic, it's scary. I mean, I'm at the stage of life, now I live at Wellspring. It's a wonderful, great place. But every day we get to hear about a new person who dies. It's inevitable. So if it's inevitable, how can I make it a gift to others? How can I grow myself and give that gift when I leave? Did that answer?
Holly, when Gail said, when the coffin lid comes down, and it makes me think about funerals, and it makes me think about different people have different levels of ability to participate in planning, and maybe talk to us some about how faith informs the decisions that people sometimes make, even around, maybe it is cremation versus in-ground burial. How does faith, or how do you work with people to try to help them really determine what is right for them, and recognizing that families are not always on the same page?
It's absolutely true. And two, I think that one of the things that we hospice folks say to people a lot is having a funeral primarily mostly planned before it is time is such a great gift to the family. And that doesn't mean having to have every song to be played and every reading chosen, but it means making sure that the people who love you, whether that is your significant other and children or other chosen family, making sure they know what you want. Because all too often when a patient has died and I sit down with the family to plan the funeral, the answer is we never talked about it. And part of the time that's because the person who was facing the end of their life wasn't willing to. They would, and I've had folks tell me, oh, she would just say, I'm not going to be here, y'all deal with it, you know, and that is certainly a way to go about it. Or they're just as often the family members, usually the children, are unwilling to broach the topic, even if someone is at a very advanced age and has a terminal diagnosis. And partly that's our own protection from the grief we know awaits. It's, if I don't talk about the fact that mom is going to die, mom is going to live forever. It's some magical thinking going on. And we encourage folks to do as much as they can beforehand so that when the time comes, your people know what you want your funeral to be like. If you want a funeral, and faith comes in because two people who are the same, on paper, the same faith, could have very different beliefs about cremation, burial, and it's always fascinating to kind of hear some of the stories behind those beliefs, because those two people of the same faith, they can say, my holy book says this, and the person who believes the opposite also says, my holy book says this, and they're talking about the same holy book. So we see people very concerned about wanting to do it right, and plenty of traditions have very specific rituals and ways of doing things that need to be done that way. And other traditions have a little bit more flexibility. So we kind of help people maneuver, whether that's ensuring that things go exactly the way they need to go for the faith background, or whether that's allowing a little bit more of that movement and choice, just to ensure that we don't, I don't ever lie to people and say that there is a sense of closure after a funeral, because the grieving is just beginning at the time of a service. But there is a sense of that piece, that giant piece of work is done. So I think faith also often comes in to shore us up as we then begin that grieving process. And for Christians and for Jews, I always encourage people, go to Lamentations, go to some of the beautiful Old Testament words about grief and longing for something or someone. There is rich stuff in all of our traditions to hold on to when we feel adrift.
Right. Thank you. And as our conversation continues, I want to invite anyone can submit a question that you might have for any of the panelists. But Ray, I am thinking back many years to when you and I used to go to African American faith communities on Saturdays, and we would talk about completing healthcare power of attorneys, living wills, and healthcare power of attorney, naming someone, talking about having difficult conversations. And we did that education so that we didn't have to have it in a crisis, but you meet people in a crisis. And I I wonder if you can talk some about how you help people navigate some of those terribly difficult decisions that they have to make, whether it is around a ventilator, whether it is around another surgery, and how you help them rely upon their faith if that is part of their being.
Well, it's important to, as you say, to try to get family members to have that conversation, and rarely do they have that conversation. But while that particular patient is conscious or aware of what's going on, for them to have that conversation then and talk about what their needs are or what they would like to have in the event they are unable to make those decisions.
Do you, when you enter a space, I wonder how you determine where faith fits in. You say that you meet people where they are. How do you learn about them? How do you determine that? How do you, as a Baptist minister, but you're representing all faiths. How do you do that?
Well, one thing I do not enter in with any preconceptions. I listen for clues. I listen to their conversation. First of all, their conversation will help me to know whether or not they are religious at all, or they have some practice of spirituality. And if I hear something, then that helps me to approach them where they are. And then I ask them if there are any specific needs that they have.
Right. And Holly, I wonder a similar thing. And I wonder how you help people navigate when there is either a difference of beliefs within a family, how you help bring people together, and how you are able to create that space for each person's individual beliefs. And I know sometimes there are strongly held beliefs and we feel like we have to accomplish something before our loved one dies, but yet I might not feel the same way.
That is certainly true. And so often we find that a family member may bring up a concern. I think Dad is really worried about this and such. And when I talk to Dad, get to know him a little bit to where I can say, what are you concerned about as you consider the end of your life? Dad might say, honestly, I'm at peace. My kids are good. The family's okay. I'm not worried about a thing. And I continue to assess after asking that very direct question. I will continue throughout our conversations to think about what might be distressing him and explore it if I do pick up on something. But you're absolutely right that often we project onto the person who is ill what we ourselves are concerned about. And so I can very gently explain to the family member, the loved one, I explored that with them and, they're okay. They're all right. But tell me what makes you think that they might be concerned about it. Because my role is not to share the details of a conversation with a patient, but with their permission to tell the loved one, yeah, we talked about what you mentioned and they don't have a concern about it, but tell me what's going on with you. And I think 9 times out of 10, maybe 9.5 times out of 10, what each person in that pair needs is simply to be heard. And so much of what chaplains do, as Ray said from the very beginning, is we listen. And here, for instance, if the loved one and the patient aren't of the same faith tradition anymore, we might listen to what is in common in terms of what matters to them. And so for the loved one or the child, the answer might be, I want to respect dad's wishes. So we're going to do the service the way he wanted to. Or it may be the patient who says, you guys can do whatever you want because I'm going to be gone and I'll be fine. So it's cluing into kind of what the concerns are behind the questions and seeing where the common ground is in any kind of disagreement. Because anytime that our emotions flare up, as they so often do in these situations, it's because there's deep feeling behind it and deep care for the person. So listening into what is important. Is it having one particular piece of music used, or is it feeling like if that loved one were still there, they would be happy with how it went, even if that one particular piece of music wasn't used?
Thank you. Gail, I'm thinking about you commented about your stage of life. And while it's lovely if we should all be introspective throughout our lives and whatever our connection to our faith or our religion, I wonder if you could talk some about, as we do age, the increased connection that many people do feel maybe to their spirituality or to sharing their experiences with others. And again, writing that letter that can be that ethical will, or recording a message to our loved ones about what has given our life value. How much more important does it become as we age, let alone if we then get a diagnosis?
I think, of course, it becomes much more important, at least from my perspective, to share this journey, to share that I didn't have all the answers, that I might look like I've had a wonderful life, which I have, and I'm very blessed, but there's challenges on the way. And I expect that they will. My dear children, my grandchildren will have challenges, because I don't know of any life that is not fraught with them. They have different ways of looking at things and everything. I just want them to know that it's okay, because we each take the next step in the best way possible that we can. It's preferable to me that we're grounded in a tradition, because often whatever that tradition is does have directions for how to be a better person, for how to reach out, for how to connect to all that we've received gratefully, or if we're not that grateful, we haven't noticed how beautiful it is outside, or how exquisite the sun is, or the small things in life that when a bird sings when you wake up, of how to find gratitude on a daily basis, even when suffering, even when having illness, even when being challenged. And there is no life, to me, that goes through life without challenge. That is part of the existence and part of the path. But being torn down and dragged and say, okay, that was the meaning of my life, it's the worst life we could ever have, that's not, to me, the hero's journey or the heroine's journey. And the hero and the heroine are always fraught with challenges. Nobody comes out just, ooh, this was perfect. But I think it's important to share those stories. When I was a child, I loved Grimm's fairy tales, because they were always fraught with challenges. But they always had 3 wishes. So sometimes wishes came true. I don't know that people tell all the stories that I was filled with as a child, but I think telling stories and telling your story, and it is a very important thing to walking the path and saying, it's all going to be all right, but it's not all beds of roses. Sometimes there's thorns in the roses. And move it on. It'll be all right. You can hurt, you can get poked, but you can also step through and smell fragrance. And I just think it's a way of speaking and talking and encouraging, and not because I have all the answers, just because I'm an example of many stories that people have that are very, very different, and all stories are precious.
And we know, Ray, all people are precious, and some people that you meet come with a deep faith tradition. And I wonder how often or how you navigate bringing in a faith leader that is already connected with a patient. So I would imagine there can be great comfort from what you can bring to the bedside or the waiting room. But I would also imagine that you also interact often with somebody's faith leader, perhaps to help them walk on a particular journey. Tell us some about how you bring that person into literally into the situation, whether it's the emergency room or a longer standing illness when somebody might be having to make difficult decisions.
First, we try to meet that person again where they are, and we try to respect whatever religious preferences they have, and try to help them to find a sense of comfort and security and meaning making in the midst of all of that. So if it comes to a time, their religion can provide some sense of closure for. And so I try to walk beside them basically where they are.
And Holly, do we work with, I know that you have the ability to provide ritual. You beautifully described the baptism. And I know it might be bringing communion or others, but I would imagine there are times when somebody gets a sense of comfort from having their particular faith leader, and how can we integrate that to make sure people are receiving the comfort that is really what they are seeking?
Certainly. It is something that in my initial conversation with a patient, I will ask about if they have a connection to a religious institution. And if so, if they're getting support from that house of worship. And if they say, well, I haven't heard from the faith leader for a long time since I got sick, I always offer, would you like me to reach out to them for you? And often the answer is no. It feels too soon. They don't want the faith leader, to think they're at death's door imminently. But what I find is that when I do have some time to get to know someone over a few months, for instance, if they bring up that faith leader again and say, oh, they visited once a couple of years ago and we had such a nice time, that again is a window for me to say, what would it be like if I gave them a call and asked them to come by and see you? And they still might say no, which is okay. But if they say, yeah, that might be nice, then I can call and just let that faith leader know, here's what's going on. Again, we don't believe anything imminent is happening, but they've talked about how much your visits meant to them, and they would love if you can stop by again. And I don't know that I've ever put in a request like that it hasn't been fulfilled. As hard a time as many faith leaders do have because of demands on their time getting to visit people, when it is as direct a request as that, they make it happen. And I will also offer a particular word of gratitude to Blessed Sacrament Catholic Church in Burlington, because there have been so many folks for whom Catholicism was their faith home, but they hadn't been connected to that particular congregation because they had moved to Burlington to be near family, but we're too ill to go to services, etc. It doesn't matter. Anytime I have talked with a priest there and said they would like to receive the anointing of the sick, the priest comes without fail, because that is such a crucial part of their faith tradition. And it is a lovely thing to be able to help someone reconnect either with a particular faith leader or with that tradition that is so important to them.
Right. And Ray, that makes me think, and actually maybe you can inform all of us. I know that there are chaplains throughout not just the Cone Health system, but most health systems and many long-term care facilities. But I'm thinking about particularly in a crisis. Am I correct that there usually are on-call chaplains so that if somebody were to be in distress, that they could request a chaplain to come and be with them during a time of need, to have somebody either say prayer or journey with them?
Well, I've had the opportunity to work with at least 3 hospitals. Right now, I'm with Cone Hospital. I work with Baptist Hospital, Wake Forest, and also High Point. And each of them have chaplains pretty much available 24 hours. In the event that there's a patient or a family member or a friend at bedside that needs some support, the chaplains are there available, and we try to meet that particular need of that particular request.
Because I think that that's important, for people to know that they can ask for that if it's not automatically offered, because for so many people that is their grounding, to have their faith acknowledged and really respected. And so to know that within an emergency situation, something happening in the middle of the night or on the weekend, that we have the ability to ask for that within the majority of our health systems. And I think that could bring comfort to so many people.
As Harley said, first we try to identify whether or not they have a religious leader or someone that they would prefer. And then if not, then we try to meet them where they are. Yes.
Right. So Gail, when we think about the ways that faith or spirituality, for some people it is scripture, for some people it is ritual, for some people it's music. And I'm thinking about people who maybe are struggling with memory loss or dementia, and how we can still help them attach to who they are, to their true beings, whether it's through music or through faith tradition that we are aware of, and help keep that be a part of their lives, and how that can help. Oftentimes, we can recite a prayer, but we might not be able to remember what our loved one's name is.
I think that oftentimes that memory of song, that memory of music lives longer than other memory. And so I think always having music in the background or some soft, perhaps that tradition, or perhaps the family could guide what would be the favorite songs that they would really connect to. I think that there's a place there that doesn't have to go to the frontal lobe. That's just, allows that relaxation and pleasure. I also think there's something amazing about the person who comes from a tradition, whether it's your tradition or not, but that reaches out to you and connects to you. And I will never forget this story. When I was at nursing school, and Dean Clellan, who was the dean of the chapel at Duke, which was a Methodist, staunch Methodist chapel, and he was Scottish. He was told us on one of our first days that our most important jobs as nursing students would be to find out the religious preference of your patient, find out their proclivities, and know it, because, and he told this story, which happened to be then somebody that I knew very well. It was the story of a young man who died just the day before graduating medical school. He was assisting in a surgery and he keeled over and he died of the disease. And Dean Clellan was called in and he administered last rites. And he did his very best to make everything exactly the way he, as a Scottish Methodist, would know how to do it. And when he left, he found it was a Jewish boy. It happened to be the brother of my husband. And he was so ashamed and he was so horrified. But when calling the family, who was in Greensboro and they were in Durham, and said, we don't care what you did. We don't care. We cared that you showed up and you were there. And that was the most important thing. But it was interesting that he still held it in his heart that this was, you've got to learn the spiritual beliefs of your patients so that you can have available the right person for them. But I do think the converse of showing up is so very important. I said, to me, when you're in that state and you have somebody who just takes your hand, who holds you, you're frightened and you think that the end is near, showing up is what one has to do. And at that point, I think we become universalistic religious because what we have is a human need to be with another human as we are going into this lonely path of who knows what. But that's my feeling. But I think music always helps. But I happen to love music. So I don't want rock and roll. But if you want to put on some Jewish melodies, that's great. If you play classical music, that's great. You might find out the interests of the family, beforehand and say, are there any special melodies?
And we want to know that, right? I mean, Holly, we want that music playing, or we want the bed facing in a particular direction, if that's what's important, or we do want those last rites or a particular prayer. We want to know that so that we can respond in a open and loving and timely way.
Certainly. We want to know if you want your dog or cat beside you in the bed, if possible, because we want that animal with you if that's what you want. There is so much of our dying experience that we have very little control over, illnesses that take our lives. But wow, when we have the ability and the time to make a little bit of a plan around, as you said, which way the bed is facing. Is it into the sun? Is it toward the sitting area where the family and friends will be? Do you want every light in the house on? Do you want it darker and quiet and calm, or raucous laughter and friends? Those things are so important and they're so unique to each of us. And so as the longer I work in hospice, the longer my things I want when my time to be in hospice comes document becomes, because we are all such beautiful individuals and we all have different needs and wants. And the way I want it to be may not be how my husband wants it to be, but I'm going to be letting him know what I want at least. So
Right.
it's a beautiful thing to be able to do that for people, to help their loved ones make that space the way they want it. And what we end up seeing is it is sacred space every time.
Yeah, and I'm thinking as we're coming to the end of our time, Ray, I'm thinking about literally when a patient has died in the hospital, that time of leaving must be often fraught and difficult for people. Sometimes it's expected, sometimes it is not. And I wonder how you walk alongside of people in that moment when their loved one has died and literally they are taking leave of their loved one.
First, I try to allow them to have as much time as they need at bedside, if possible. And what I call ministry of presence, knowing when my presence is needed and for how long, and whether or not I need to exit and give them the time for themselves. And I think that's important that people have an opportunity to express their grief as they so desire. Sometimes they want staff with them. Sometimes they want to be by themselves. And you just have to observe and listen carefully to make sure that you are making the right exit or you stay in the right amount of time. So presence is important.
No, I think so, Gail, as we prepare to end our time together, I want to circle back to your invitation for all of us. What is the way that we start writing our ethical will?
Start. Well, I don't think that there's a formula to how we start. Mine goes to my dearest children, to my cherished grandchildren, to those yet to come. And then I list my parents' Hebrew names, my grandparents' Hebrew names, and their backgrounds. And that this is what you are. You receive this. And then I say what I was taught by my grandparents and what lessons I hold dear that I was taught to pass on, that I am praying that they will receive with their hearts. That comes deep. I think there's no formula. I think there's, but for
Maybe just doing it. I think Gail might be frozen. But Holly, maybe leave us with a parting thought for what you have learned for the honor of having been in the presence of so many over the years of your work.
I have learned innumerable things, but first and foremost, that however each of us defines our spirituality, it is a beautiful thing to be able to serve people and to support their spirituality and their faith as they are going through a crisis. And Ray deals with acute crises, and I've heard hospice referred to as a longer term crisis, a short, slow motion crisis. And it is sacred to do this work and to support people in that journey.
Well, thank you. I want to thank each of you for sharing your wisdom, but mostly for sharing your presence as you do for so many, so regularly. I want to thank our participants. I want to share a quote. This quote is from Atul Gawande, and he is a physician. He wrote a book, Being Mortal. And the quote says, "Our job is to enable well-being. And well-being is about the reasons one wishes to be alive. Those reasons matter not just at the end of life, but all the way along." And so I want to thank you for participating and joining in today's webinar. I also want to invite everyone to join us. We will be putting out information shortly about our webinar next month, and that is going to be focusing on mental health issues. We know that that is something that is a reality for so many of us in our community, and so we are going to be creating space and opportunity for conversation around that in May. So look for information and please register and join us. And I will say thank you, and we should all be well. And until we have a chance to gather again, be well. Thank you, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Risa.
Thank you.